Today we speak with homeopath Monica Frohman in Austria, who loves treating humans as well as animals with homeopathy. I get so excited when we get to speak about using homeopathy with our animals on this podcast because animals truly respond so incredibly well to homeopathy. Just this week, I had amazing success with a chicken, which I thought there was no way she was going to survive the huge wound which she sustained. But amazingly, some aconite for shock and then some arnica and some of the Narayani wall mix, and she has been healing beautifully and now back to her happy, healthy self. I still don't really know how she survived her injury, but it's just shown me once again how incredible homeopathy is for not just humans, but our animals as well. Be sure to join Monica's Facebook groups as well, called Horses and Homeopathy, and she also has another one called Farm Animals and Homeopathy. And if you're not using homeopathy on your animals yet, I really hope this episode will inspire you to give it a go. Thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangouts. Today, we speak with the lovely Monica Frohman from Austria. Welcome, Monica.
Hi, well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I think you're officially my first guest from Austria, although you lived in Canada for many years, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Excellent. And you said that you do speak the lingo, so you don't get too lost in Austria?
That's right. I'm fluent in German, but I still think in English and I dream in English.
Well, you dream in English? That is funny because I was raised in South Africa, so it was our main language. And I actually remember when I moved to New Zealand at 17, when I was about 3 years down the track, I had my first English dream. And I remember waking up thinking, oh, that was in English, and how it's just continued in English from then. And how when you talk to yourself or you think about things, like, what language, is that also in German?
It's always in English. Very rarely in German. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, all I can say is, ich verstehe Sie nicht.
Oh, okay, but I understood you perfectly.
Awesome. Now, tell us, Monica, how were you first introduced to homeopathy?
For me, I had a long-term health problem that wasn't serious, but very annoying. Mm-hmm. And I'd been to many different doctors to try and have it resolved. And my last stop was at a doctor's office who had said he had seen a homeopath speak. And his words were, I don't know very much about it, but this guy really seemed like he knew what he was doing. And I think this might be the direction that you need to go in. So interestingly, I was directed to a homeopath from an allopath. And I did go to see him then. And I wasn't even better yet. As soon as I started seeing him in my very first weeks of my appointments, I knew that I wanted to be a homeopath. I always wanted to be in the medical field, but I didn't want to be in the allopathic world because I felt like we were seeing things like suppression and lots of medications, but no resolutions, no cures. But I always was so interested in the world of medicine. My dad had that kind of background. He wasn't a doctor, but he was a biomedical engineer. And then I decided to study psychology instead. And that wasn't quite right either. And then I went to see this homeopath, and it was like the whole world opened up for me. It was a whole new experience. And it was, I think the big reason why it grabbed me even before I knew I was going to be better was because it was the first time a doctor took the time to listen to me and really hear what was going on with not just my health concerns, but not the specific health concern, but everything, the whole package. And that's so rare. And it really struck me that was going to be what I needed to do. And then within a couple of months, my health issue resolved, and I never looked back. I looked for a school right away where I could study, and it went on from there.
That is so cool. And you studied in Canada, right?
I did. I studied at the Canadian College of Homeopathic Medicine, which at the time, when I graduated, it was still called the Toronto School of Homeopathic Medicine. It was very much smaller and wasn't a college yet.
I actually had an email just this week from a listener that said they're in Canada and they are studying at the Canadian College of Homeopathy. So, yeah, that was really
very cool.
Yeah. And your psychology background would have been great for your homeopathic studies, I'm guessing.
It was. I didn't complete the degree because I was very into it in the first couple of years in where they were teaching a lot about psychology. And then the third year was a lot of psychiatric nurses in the class. And it all of a sudden turned into psychiatry and not psychology, where we were discussing drugs and side effects and how to prescribe and stuff like that. And then I knew it wasn't going in the direction that I wanted to go in. So I used what I had from that. And then I just progressed on to homeopathy.
Amazing. Now, you also have a special interest in using homeopathy on our furry and scaly and feathery friends. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in that?
Well, I've always been an animal lover. And as a child, I always thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And when I finished high school, I even worked for a vet for a year. And I remember the vet, who had been in business for something over 30 years, saying to me, be careful about becoming a veterinarian. You may end up doing nothing but doing spays, neuters, and treating flea problems for the rest of your life. I got the sense from him that he was bored in his practice, which was very unfortunate because he was a very nice man and had a huge heart for animals. But I took it to heart and I left it be for a while. And circumstances in life didn't allow me to go to study immediately anyways. And then when I discovered that you could treat animals with homeopathy, well, I thought, well, that's like the best of both worlds. I can treat humans and animals. And I kind of made a name for myself a little bit in Canada because there aren't that many people who do treat animals and feel comfortable with them. And knowing the various species, I grew up with dogs, cats, rabbits. I had a pet goat as a child. We had horses growing up. And I think that even if you're not a veterinarian, just like as a homeopath for humans, you don't need to be a medical doctor, but you do have to have an understanding of the pathology and the pathophysiology. And as an animal lover, and as a horse person especially, I think you start to learn that stuff very early on. Because even as a layperson, when you have a horse on your farm and the horse is sick, the vet will leave you with medication, syringes, you learn how to draw blood at an early point in your horse ownership. These are things that a horse vet leaves you with, which you would never do if with a small animal. So you get to have a great deal of knowledge that develops as a result of that. Plus, I mean, just, the research you do over the years and learning what's common to an animal and so forth.
Amazing. And I think you mentioned that you also have a Facebook page that help people with treating their animals. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Yeah, we have a couple of groups that I am involved in with 3 other professional homeopaths, and we're sort of all over the world. And one of the pages is called Horses and Homeopathy. And the other page is called Farm Animals and Homeopathy. And for both of those pages, we tried to have homeopaths that were in different time zones so that if there was an issue that came up or an emergency that came up, you could reach out for a homeopath and get help pretty much within a few hours as a result of being in different time zones. And all of us have a passion, especially for horses, but for animals in general. And we help people to understand what remedies that they can take on their own or give on their own by asking for a few questions so that they can look into the remedies on their own. And if it gets to something beyond an acute case, then we ask that they make an appointment so that we can help them in a more in-depth way.
That's amazing. Can you maybe share with us a little bit about what are some of the most common questions that you get asked in the group and what are some of the most common remedies that you end up recommending in the group for various complaints?
Well, some of the most common questions about horses tend to be about things like colic. That's one of the biggest complaints in animals and horses, and one of the most dangerous illnesses and ailments. Horses that colic frequently, that's more of a chronic problem, but for acute issues where, the horse got into the grain bin or had too much grass or had an exciting event that upset its stomach, we see remedies like Lycopodium, Nux vomica, Carbovegetabilis, sometimes Belladonna. Those are the ones that come up most frequently for that. Then we have issues around injuries, which, pretty much everyone in the world knows. Arnica, who is in the world of homeopathy, big one, arnica, rust tox, ledum for puncture wounds. We have a lot of people who complain about parasites on the skin. So we have sweet itch and rain rot and sarcoidosis. That's a fairly common one that comes up. And those are more for the puncture wounds or bug bites and that sort of thing. We have the ledum, maybe silica, apis for bigger bites and stings, But for the things like sarcoidosis, we'd like to take a case because there's a lot of history there and, that sort of thing. And, injuries, sprains and strains, arnica, Rostox, that kind of thing.
I've had a couple of questions in my group this week with poisonings, accidental poisonings of animals. And, we've got our beautiful remedies like arsenicum that's just so amazing for that. But, homeopathy is amazing. The other thing we have in Australia, I don't know if you have that in Austria, but now and again we'll get snake bite inquiries, but, can use homeopathic remedies for that. And somebody told me that's about $2,000 here if you had to get the snake antivenom for your dog. So if you can use like a $10 homeopathic lachesis remedy to help that animal instead, certainly makes it a bit easier on the budget, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I actually did treat a horse in Australia through the group who had been bitten by an undefined snake. There's something, I can't remember the name of it that they thought it was, but the horse was very poorly and they thought it was going to die. It had already been given the antivenom. It wasn't responding. And it had lost tremendous amounts of weight, was bleeding from all the orifices. It was just a terrible, terrible case. And it responded beautifully to Crotalus horridus. And really, really totally recovered and is now I'm still in touch with the lady. The horse has regained weight. It has a shiny coat. There seems to be a small amount of paralysis that's left in the lower left side of the lip, but it's getting better. So hopefully it'll resolve completely. So now his tongue hangs out a little bit on the left side, makes him kind of cute. But he's fully recovered. He's eating well, drinking well, and the vets were astounded. They had no idea what to make of it because they were pretty sure the horse was going to have to be put down.
Amazing. I know about a vet. I'm not even going to say location or anything because and it's from a really good friend of mine, and she was saying how this vet told her that he only ever uses homeopathic remedies for snake bites here in Australia. He doesn't even use antivenom, and he has such incredible success for that. And it is really expensive if you have to purchase that antivenom. And obviously we'll do anything for our pets and no amount of money will be spared because, we love them so much. But if there is a safe and more importantly, effective way and cheap way that you can do it, then why wouldn't you give it a try at least? So
for sure.
Always my mantra with homeopathy. Just give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if the one thing I always try to tell people too is, people will say to me, well, I don't really believe in it. And I'll say, you don't have to believe in it. It'll work anyways. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. A horse can, or a cat or a rabbit, I've even put a homeopathic remedy in a fish tank before. And as if that fish knows it's getting a remedy, it has no idea.
Absolutely.
And they respond so beautifully. It makes no difference whatsoever. I completely also disagree with the possibility that it's a placebo effect because, again, the animal cannot know that they're getting a remedy.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, have you got some case studies maybe of treating animals that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I could do that. I recently had a dog that I was treating who had a very, very severe case of skin eruption all over the body. And I like to always discuss, as homeopaths, we're kind of like, we always have to look at the whole picture. It's not just about just prescribing the remedy. You have to look at nutrition and hygiene and exercise and all that kind of thing. So we had determined that he had a very good diet. They had taken all the allergens out of the diet, and yet still he wasn't responding. And he was just raw and had no hair at all. It was just awful and so itchy and so uncomfortable. And I took the case, and he was a very boisterous, boundaryless dog who would just get in your face and love you like crazy, but also very easily frightened and very startled by loud noises, absolutely terrified during thunderstorms, had a very, very high thirst for cold water. And the family always they knew he would look at his bowl and look at the family and then look at the bowl and look at the family member. And then they knew, okay, the water's not cold enough. They had to go and put, either freshen up the water, or they sometimes would even put ice cubes in it. And it was such a beautiful picture for phosphorus. So we gave him phosphorus, and he had, it depends on the situation. We don't always dose daily. As you know, sometimes we dose once a week, once a month. It totally depends on the symptoms. So the instructions were to give one dose one time, see how the symptoms were. If the itching improved, great. If it started to come back, repeat the remedy. So as it turned out, they needed a remedy dose about every 3 days. And over the period of about a month, his hair, you could see this hair starting to grow back in. He wasn't scratching anymore. It's been several months now, and he's completely full of hair. I wish I could show you pictures.
Aww.
And he's completely happy and itch-free. So it's a very good result.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is. And it's so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that treating animals is sometimes even more effective, more quickly effective, let's put it that way, than treating humans, because in humans, we do so many other things that make our system so toxic that it becomes a bit more of a hunt for the right remedy, if you want to put it that way, because you got to work through all the other things that are happening first.
And a dog doesn't care about the, political status or the world, state of affairs or what they're going to have for dinner next week. So they are probably not quite as complicated mentally as us. So I
Absolutely
do think
right. And I think too that as a result, if you already are helping an animal who is owned by a person who is open to homeopathy, they're already doing so much to make sure the stress level is okay, the exercise is right. You know what I mean? Like it's a different world entirely. As I get human patients, I tend to notice that people come quite often once they're at their wit's end, they don't know what else to do. But as for animals, they come to you as a preventative sometimes even, or far earlier in the disease, because some of the veterinary options are so costly that they think, okay, well, maybe if we try this route, this will help. And I can avoid the chemotherapy or the surgery or whatever that might be. And often that's the case.
Mm-hmm, amazing. And, the animal doesn't know that you're taking him to a vet who is going to help him. The animal just sees you leaving him somewhere and people doing stuff to him. So it can be so traumatic. So if you can avoid that visit, then, why wouldn't you? But when you were saying about the photos, I thought that I just mentioned I have got a Facebook group. I've just started. This is the first time I've mentioned it on here, but it is in some of the intros of some of the episodes. It's called Homeopathy Hangout Facebook group, because podcasting is very lonely. So you put all this information out there and it's just crickets. You don't hear anything back. I think if I had a YouTube channel or something like that, at least you get some comments, even rude comments, something just to get something back. But on a podcast, it's just crickets. You don't know if people are actually enjoying your content. You might see the numbers go up now and again, but it's very lonely. So I now have a Facebook group called Homeopathy Hangout Facebook group. And it'll be great to add you in there and put your before and after photos on there, because the whole idea with the group is to keep the discussion going after our initial chats and after the show. So yeah, if you ever do have those photos to share, that'll be wonderful to put it in the group. And so people
absolutely, I would love to do that.
Yeah, I always say picture paints 1,000 words. And I once had a before and after picture of a client I treated for eczema. And I mean, I was so busy after I posted those photos, because a picture doesn't lie. You can see the before photo, you can see the after photo, and especially with the animal, there's no placebo involved. So
yeah, and when you can illustrate something like the skin, which is so blatant, that really speaks a picture. As you say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I've also got a pony that I was treating not that long ago with a disease called Cushing's syndrome. And there are lots of different symptoms that go along with Cushing's syndrome, including laminitis, which is it's called, the late term is founder. I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, but just briefly, it's because of the problem with the metabolism, the feet have a pulsating and a swelling of the lamina, which is the lining of the hoof. And because it's kind of, you can liken it to the brain that's enclosed in the skull. The swelling is prevented from being allowed to expand because the bone is in the way, or the hoof wall is in the way. And so as a result, this swelling causes all kinds of problems, including eventually that the coffin bone, which is the bone that goes down into the hoof, will rotate and turn and actually can protrude out of the bottom of the sole of the foot, which most of the time ends in euthanasia. That's one of the many complications of Cushing's syndrome. At the early stages, it's not just the laminitis, it's also like coats that don't shed well, excessive thirst, excessive urination, and diarrhea. So I really have a before and after picture of a pony's butt, which is like covered in diarrhea. And then the same pony a month later that is completely clean with a shiny white tail. And it's a white pony, so it's really, really obvious. And and he's responding also very beautifully to the homeopathic remedy.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And of course, you have an international practice, right? Like people around the world can consult you for their animals and themselves.
That's correct. Yeah, I have a virtual practice which grew after moving to Austria, but then especially after COVID, because that was the one way you could still work is if you did it online until things got sorted where you could go back to work. So it's been growing tremendously. And I always like to see if I can. I'll do the appointments over Zoom or whatever video way of doing it is. And if the animal wants to be a part of it, then the animal will stand in the screen too. But also I'll just have people send me pictures, or if I treat kids, I'll have the mom or dad send me a photo, because I do like to get a visual as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That helps a lot, but it's totally doable online.
It is. I always get my clients to just WhatsApp me a little video of the child, and or I don't treat animals, but just to really see that energy, because the thing is, we can pick up a lot of stuff that you as the parent or the owner of that pet will not be able to pick up, because it'll just be something normal for you that you wouldn't even think is strange or unusual. But as homeopaths, there's all sorts of fine little details that we'll be able to pick up, and the more information that we have and the more videos we get to see, if we can't see them actually in the online consult, the easier I find it, for sure.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, because, I call myself a homeopathy geek or a homeopathy nerd, because I go around in the world looking at life as a homeopathy, and I'll see somebody with this thing, or I'll hear somebody say a certain symptom, and I'd be like, oh, even if I don't say it out loud, I still know. And it's so brutal. I go on vacation and I always have my first aid kit of about 65 remedies. And I've been on vacation and seen things happen to people, either food poisoning or severe sunburn or an injury. And I'll go up to complete strangers and be like, I'm a homeopath, and if you're interested, I have this remedy. Would you like to give it a try? It's so bad. I can't. My husband's like, oh my gosh, this again, right? But it's so wonderful to see it. And of course, I don't ask for money or anything like that. It's because of how wonderful homeopathy is. You just are willing to do that and let people know about it and make the world aware of it.
Now, speaking of being an advocate for homeopathy, this might be a good little segue into the World Council of Health. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you're involved for that?
So very recently, I've been following the World Council for Health for some time now, and we have another homeopath colleague who is the organizer of Bright Light News. And he arranged for me to be interviewed by the World Council for Health to speak about homeopathy and to try and give homeopathy and homeopaths around the world a voice, so that people recognize that it's an option for acute and chronic health issues, not just for people who are, the impression has always been over the years, not so much now anymore, but when I first started, people expected me to have, an incense burning in my office, and I'd be barefoot in my Birkenstocks or whatever. And, I have Birkenstocks, no question, but I don't wear them at the office. And I wanted to make sure that, or try and help get people to understand that homeopathy is there for all different types of health concerns, from the common cold to cancer and everything in between. And it's been a godsend for treating COVID symptoms, preventing COVID, and for treating long COVID. And we have a large group of homeopaths who are involved in doing that. And we're just trying to get the word out even more that that is an absolute option.
Amazing. And what would you say to the listeners out there who would like to give you a hand in spreading the word on homeopathy? Are there any advice that you would give them?
I think if they are already patients of homeopathy, they should share their experiences as much as they can. While the closed groups on Facebook are amazing, because it gives you lots of areas to look at things in a private or a confined space, it doesn't let everyone else around you know about it. And I think it's important to remember that we can't influence everyone. And the people who are completely against it, you just have to let that be, because those people, you're not going to change their minds, and you can't get upset about it if they're not willing. But talking about your experiences with it, talking about it on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, join the groups that are open groups and talk about it as much as you can. If you see a homeopath, hand out their business cards, stuff like that, and share it with your medical practitioner if it's at all possible. Talk about it with your doctor, dentist, veterinarian. Some of them are more open than you might expect. And doing that will start to help people understand how useful it can be. I have done a sort of a very, it's an anecdotal study. It's not a scientific study, but I started using homeopathic remedies to prevent COVID at the very beginning of the pandemic, and gave a number of people the remedy and followed 116 people with their consent, and saw how well they managed to get through the times when it was extremely contagious. They had been exposed. There were other members in the family who had not taken the preventative remedy, who had gotten sick, and the family member who had taken it were helping those people, feeding them, bringing them things, totally exposed, and still didn't get COVID. So there's so many areas in which, and I think too that the people who are in regular homeopathic care are just generally healthier and have a stronger immune system, so are less susceptible anyways to getting sick or getting severe illness. So just putting that out there, letting people know about it, that's, I think, the thing that is lacking.
I love it. That is so
being
good.
Judged for it.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, all we can do is plant seeds. You might be the first person who mentions homeopathy to, person XYZ, and they might just think, oh, this person's completely nuts. But then somebody else might come along and mention homeopathy, and then they go, wait, that other person mentioned it to me. And then a third person might come along. So, you never know where along that line you are with planting the little seeds. So I always, say the same, just plant those seeds, and then don't get upset if it doesn't land on soil, because you don't know when that soil is going to be ready for that seed to sprout. So just get it out there. And Monica, how can people get hold of you if they want to make a booking or find out more or join your Facebook groups? How do they do that? Well,
my website is from www.frohmannhomeopathy.com. And Frohman is spelled Frohmann, homeopathy.com. You can email me at monica@frohmannhomeopathy.com. And you can find me on Facebook under, Monica Frohman, Frohman Alberger, which is, my married name. Reach out, even if it's just for questions. You don't have to book an appointment necessarily. Anything I can do to help get the word out there for homeopathy, I'm all for it.
That's amazing. And any final message that you want to share with our listeners?
Wow, I'm being put on the spot.
I just want to make sure that there's not like a final thing that you, like a burning thing that you want to say, and then I've cut you off. So
no, not at all. But I will. I think it's important for me to mention. I mean, we've talked about animals a lot. I do treat humans. About 80% of my practice is humans. 20% is animals. It doesn't matter the size of a person or the size of an animal. It's not about the size of the dose. It's about the vitality of the individual that helps us to choose a remedy. So just try it. That's my message. Just try it.
That's the best message out there. I completely agree. Just try it. It's can't go wrong. Wonderful. Monica, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was lovely to connect with you.
I really enjoyed it myself, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Such a pleasure. Chat soon. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
The Homeopathy Hangout podcast is produced by Eugenie Kruger Homeopathy. For more information, visit eugeniekruger.com. The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not replace advice from your medical practitioner. Please read our full disclaimer in the show notes. Thank you for listening.